Hello folks, welcome to an edition of Irish Whip Wrestling Chronicles, where we talk about the history of not only Irish wrestling, Irish Whip Wrestling too. And today I'm joined by none other than Garth Kid, better known as Mandrake.
Mandrake, yeah.
Former IWW International Heavyweight Champion and longest running International Heavyweight Champion. Garth, welcome to Irish Whip
Thank you
Wrestling
very much.
Chronicles.
Amazing. Thank you very much for having me, Simon. I'm really looking forward to this and taking a trip down memory lane and discussing all the wonderful times and cool stuff, memories over the years. So,
and for me, it's great to be here because we'll talk now about as we go on, we'll talk about the history of the Irish Whip Wrestling Championship and you as the champion, longest reigning, and to me, you are the best Irish Whip Wrestling International Champion.
Thank you so much.
For a multitude of reasons, which we'll get into too. But life these days for you beyond wrestling, you're very happy. It's a very positive experience for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I feel very, very lucky, very, very blessed in a lot of ways to be where I am in life now. I'm like I said, I have a centre where I teach martial arts and personal training. And I get to give back to people and educate them, keep them fit and strong, and it gives me an influence in a positive aspect over a lot of young people and things. So I take a great deal of pleasure in knowing that I can, like I did when I like to think I did when I wrestled, I inspired a lot of young people, and I still have that sphere of influence on people, which is cool.
You inspired a lot of young people at wrestling shows with skulls hanging around their neck and metal spikes.
Yeah, well, the one thing I would definitely say is that it's okay to be different and be into slightly all. I think a couple of years ago I got invited back to my high school. And when I was in high school, I was a very different kid. I was into my monsters and, maybe not fitting in with the usual cliques. But they invited me back for an alternative jobs talk, as in they were really impressed with where I went with my life and everything. Followed my own path, not the conventional 9 to 5. So it's cool to be different, and it's cool to show kids that it's okay to be different and go and pursue your dreams, and whatever you're into is cool as long as it's not hurting anyone.
Young children are very impressionable. They believed every single thing they saw in the ring. They believed the characters, whether you were a good guy, bad guy, and you were excellent at both, particularly for me as a good guy. But yes, you influenced a lot of children, I have to say, from a fitness point of view.
Yeah.
You look back in the day, you were in tremendous shape. And yeah, your etiquette was very inspirational to people in the dressing room and out on the floor. And
yeah, I think that definitely comes from doing martial arts for as long as I have. That was the first activity I really ever fell in love with was Taekwondo. And along with practicing Taekwondo, it's not just kicking and punching, it's not just violence. Taekwondo, the word Taekwondo is foot, fist, art. So art, way, method. There's a way of thinking and conducting yourself. So Taekwondo has 5 tenets, which is Yeu, Yomchi, Ine, Guki, Bakjabugal, which is basically courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit. I like to think that through training and whatnot, that those things become ingrained with you.
so tell me, why would you go from such a competitive, legitimate combat background into the theatrical world of professional wrestling in Ireland?
Because it's the entertainment side I loved, being able to inspire people and stuff. And I was like a little kid that grew up during the Hulkamania thing, and not that I was really ever a Hulk Hogan fan. It was always like the Psycho Sids and the Undertakers that I kind of liked and gravitated towards, and watching martial arts movies, the physicality involved in that, and wrestling and again, music. I love music, and again, wrestling just seemed this thing that was absolutely larger than life, with these people who are pretty much the closest thing to superheroes that you'll ever see. So it was like, I want to be that. And like I said, I was always a bit different. I always kind of followed my own path in life. And, I think back when I was like gravitating or starting to think about, I want to try pro wrestling, it was kind of an unusual thing. It was definitely an unusual thing. Here it was unusual. But I bit the bullet, and I pursued that goal, and I'm glad I did. But it was definitely the larger than life superheroes.
We're a little bit different growing up. You're a little bit different as a character in yourself. I find in wrestling, it draws a different kind of I wouldn't say a shy person, but a person who mightn't be 100% confident in themselves.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. Someone who was as tough as you coming into wrestling with a combat sports background, you still knew yourself, you didn't really fit in certain circles. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Wrestling does draw those kind of characters to it. Whereas you had the best of both worlds. You had that legitimate sports background, and then you had your interest in professional wrestling and to try and. But you always had a goal, hadn't you, to get to the WWE as opposed to just.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think I've always been the sort of person that if I decide I'm going to do something, I'm not just going to delve into it. I'm going to go the whole hog. And to me, it was like, well, WWE is the whole hog. It's what you see on TV. It's the end goal. So when I started, it wasn't like I'm going to try this. It was like the moment I made that decision and stepped into the old school that we used to have. It was like WWE. That was where I was going, and that was it. That's what. Which is
a perfect goal to have, as opposed to just wanting to be seen. It's like acting. You see in acting, not only in Ireland, around the world, a lot of people do community plays and so forth just to be seen, to be heard, and that's why some people get into wrestling. Whereas you had a clear cut goal. Now, I just want to get on. We're talking about the school. So for the school, for me, you were obviously training there long before I even realised you were there, because they had separate trainers in the school, and at the time I lived in the Midlands and the school was in Dublin.
Yeah.
And we had a show in Belfast at the Spectrum Theatre, I think it was, and we were short for a ring announcer.
Yeah.
And the lads were like, why don't you get the new kid, Garth? I was like, who? Garth. He lives up in Northern Ireland.
The Nordy can give you the lay of the land.
You've got two completely areas. You're in Newry and Belfast.
Yeah.
So I got your number, got in contact with you, you came along. And when I saw you, I was just, what? I thought you were the security guard, like you were just a physical specimen. And I said to some of the guys, how come I haven't heard of this lad? How you carried yourself like as an athlete, very polite and gentlemanlike.
Yeah.
And to me, there must have been a sense of jealousy. If Simon sees this guy, it's going to start putting an interest into him. And that's obviously what it was. And from that day that we were short from a ring announcer, for me, put you on the fast track to get your goal a bit quicker.
Yeah. It was definitely an experience. I definitely thought, like, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. Going to a wrestling school and you learn to wrestle. I was like, wow, there's all these other things that you have to do as well, like MCing and ring announcing, selling merch and doing all those things, which are skills that, like, I definitely think that any young person trying to get into wrestling should experience. But ring announcing was definitely an interesting one. It was like just getting thrown in the deep end and like, here's a microphone, introduce these people. And you had Darcy, who was this Eamon Darcy, amazing, wonderful, best like ring announcer guy ever in the business, in my opinion.
And TV
commentator. Absolutely amazing guy. But he'd come out and he'd be so charismatic, amazingly charismatic. Everyone loved him. He had his Darcy shuffle, his little dance, and then along came me, who just stood there and just spoke in his microphone. It's like,
not only did you just speak in the microphone, but you had a very heavy Northern Ireland accent.
Yeah.
I remember saying, just pronounce it. Now, I'm not one to talk with my heavy Dublin accent. I have to learn how to communicate properly for international audience. But it's absolutely amazing, and we'll touch on it again, is trainee, ring announcer, runner, referee, ring crew, before you even had a match. And with matches you worked your way up, and you never once complained. Is that back to your combat training as a Taekwondo?
Absolutely. It definitely comes again from the martial arts background, because when you start training, you start as a beginner, a white belt, and you have to acquire the skills before you move on to the next stage. It's not a case of just turning up and like, oh, here's a new belt. It's like you have to earn those skills. And I think that was just hardwired into me. So once I kind of figured out that's the way things are done, that you have to pay your dues and learn all these other skills, it was no problem to me. I wasn't afraid of hard work.
And it showed off. But tell me this, you're in such great shape as well. Mm-hmm. So you did bodybuilding also. Was that around the same time frame, before or after?
It was in around the same time frame. About the time, well, slightly, I was kind of messing around with weights a lot through my youth, and even when I was doing taekwondo, I enjoyed a little bit of weight training, but I took it a lot more seriously when I decided, okay, I want to give this wrestling thing a crack. So even before I like committed to stepping into the school and traveling to the school, it was a case of like, well, I have to start looking like a wrestler, because the wrestlers I was watching on TV didn't look like some random guy down the street. They looked like the superheroes. So I had to start working out and eating better and trying to improve my physique. So I started trying to look like a wrestler. I think that kind of...
Which again is a great mindset, but so many people get into professional wrestling and they're just, I'll wear the t-shirt, I'll wear, something to hide their physique. And they'll say a certain wrestler on TV does it, Stone Cold does it. But Stone Cold was in shape, he was talented, he was a main eventer for the biggest wrestling company in the world. So you can't use that as an excuse.
No. And
people used to look at you and they would get jealous because you're in such tremendous shape. And promoters will always be gravitated to people who look impressive. But you were impressive and you had a great attitude. And I could see a ton of potential in you,
I appreciate that. That's a great vote of confidence.
And tell me, what differences did you find coming from martial arts training to training in a professional wrestling skill?
That's an interesting question. Well, I found that, first of all, like training to be, so I did very well in terms of the competitive side of martial arts. So I was not afraid of hard work, and I'd done plenty of hard training, but stepping into a wrestling school and learning to wrestle and taking bumps and hitting ropes and things like that was a lot harder than I'd actually originally thought it was going to be. I think you see it on TV and you assume it's going to be pretty easy, but like I know from experience of having a little bit of time around trainees and stuff like that, you can tell straight away when someone takes the first back bump. You look at them in the eyes, you can tell it's like they're either okay, they're gonna get through this, or it's not for them. And I think got in, took bumps, learned all this, and realized, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. But it didn't put me off. I stuck with it. But there was a lot of other people who I seen come and go, and it was that thing of like when they hit the ropes for the first time, they were like, these ropes hurt me. And it's like you wouldn't see them come back. When you first started, you were coming back from training, you could see like the bruises on your back from just running the ropes constantly. And again,
basics, learning the basics, learning how to bump, run the ropes, simple little things. Yeah. Everything starts at the core. And I'm sure explaining that to you, I don't have to come from martial arts. Everything starts at a core level.
Absolutely.
And blossoms.
It's like you start as a little seed. The little seed is planted into the earth, and it grows into a plant and a tree.
And tell me, for anyone watching this who wants to be a wrestler, or maybe even starting out, what advice would you give them of how to carry themselves in a skill from a personality, mindset point of view, starting out? Trainees.
Remember to maybe use your ears more than your mouth. So when you're talking a lot, you're not learning, and if you're there, it's a fantastic opportunity. But remember, you're only ever truly going to learn is when you listen to people who know more than you do, like the people who are training you. Remember always to be humble and polite, because you're stepping into an entirely new world. So I think to be humble and to listen, and if you truly want to be successful, don't be afraid of hard work, because wrestling is incredibly hard. And it's not just the physicality, the business itself is very hard. It's a very tough business. and to succeed you have to be a very physically and mentally tough person, I think.
And for you, you wrestled around Europe, throughout Ireland and Britain. You didn't wait on someone to say, hey, I want you to wrestle in Portugal.
Yeah.
You went out chasing that.
Yeah, no, again, I was very lucky as well that I had people like yourself and, you know, other people giving me information, telling me, you know, teaching me. So, and I realized very quickly that you have to get yourself out there and you have to be willing to put yourself out and reach out to different promoters and try and send your photographs and your matches. Now I think it's just you send them a YouTube clip, but it was different back then because YouTube was just a new thing. So it was about getting yourself out there and having a go and not being afraid.
And tell me now, I'd always tell guys to get your foot in the door somewhere. Brian Dixon saying in England at the time, who was running so many shows, fly yourself over. You know, take that chance. Don't expect him to fly you over, someone that hasn't got a name at the time. And for anybody out there, not just some rinky-dink promotion, but anywhere that has a reputation or somewhere you can learn, I think it's worth the investment of flying yourself in or making your way there to get seen, and then it's up to the promoter then to want you back and then work a deal out with him.
I did that. I went to Liverpool to go to an all-star show and just say hi to Brian Dixon, I am, and that was it. I did that so I could specifically, I'd sent lots of emails and things through, and I might have got a polite reply once or twice, but I figured if I turned up and said hello, how, you know, not say like, oh, you're going to book me now, but just introduce myself and things like that. And I think shortly after I eventually got to do an all-star show, I think.
That's impressive because again, it's not ego, it's taking that risk, taking that gamble of doing that. So fair play to you. And anyone out there as well, I highly recommend that. Like, people come along, like, if you're an established wrestler and you're like, I want to get a gig with, say, an Impact or an MLW, that's grand if you're an ex-WWE, AEW guy. But if you're just starting to want to be looked at, you have to take those gambles. Don't invest in yourself. That's a good example of investing in yourself.
You got to invest yourself and sacrifice, and you know.
And there's a difference with someone expecting you every time to fly yourself in.
Yeah.
You know, or work for a certain fee. That's taking advantage. Don't fall for that, like, but just initially invest in yourself that way by getting to that promotion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they need to see you and see that you're a team player and you're willing to go and give up your time and everything else, and I think as well it just shows a good attitude and a team player attitude, a professional attitude. You know, almost like a job interview, isn't it? It
is. But although professional wrestling isn't always professional,
no,
particularly on the independent circuit, so you can't always look at it that way.
Yeah.
So your character of Mandrake, so you're obviously into your metal music.
Metal music. I love horror movies, anything like that. Anything that's kind of like dark, for lack of a better term. You know, it's just entertainment. It's cool. It's interesting to watch it. It's not like, you know, because you listen to heavy metal music or you watch horror movies that you're an evil, sinister person. So, but I think that whole culture, I grew up watching horror movies. My granddad used to babysit me when I was a little teeny tiny kid, and he used to have on the old Christopher Lee Dracula movies and stuff, and or the Godzilla movies, which would be on Channel 4, I don't know what time, and he used to let us watch these movies, and I think that imprinted on me, and I've always been fascinated with the monster hiding in the shadows rather than there's the prince on the horse, you know. So that's where that character kind of
What was really interesting was, because obviously the Irish Whip audience at the time, and for almost its whole existence, was kids and families.
Yeah.
And it's how were we going to make that character kid friendly and family friendly, and that was a challenge in itself, but it worked out well.
Yeah, it did.
And you became like this Mandrake character with the horror. The horror came into the look, but not in a scary way.
Yeah.
How you carried yourself, your look, the kids loved it.
Yeah.
It grew as it went along, but by the end it was Mandrake was one of the best right up at the very top Irish whip wrestling characters ever.
That's very cool, yeah.
Bringing in horror and metal music. So it can be done once you figure out how to put it to the audience.
Yeah, I think like to get across to the audience, you can't really lie, I don't think, with your character. I think with me it was just like the things I was into, it just became an extension of personality. And so I think it's important for people starting out and things like that is to figure out what they're about. You know, you got to figure out who you are and then just kind of turn the volume up a little bit.
And everybody that got the belt, I should say, with exception of Sheamus, always came up that way. And the only reason Sheamus didn't come up that way was because he had a tremendous look.
Yeah.
And for me, I wanted to push an Irish guy there straight away, and he was perfect. Very green starter now. I'm sure some of your own matches you look back and I look at some of the stuff with Irish and go, oh my God, he's back today. So if he was kind of pushed into that position as the first champion, and in fairness to him, if he had come along the second tour champion, he would have come up the exact same way. And he did. He was a driver, he did street team, but he just didn't do those jobs like your ring announcing and your the slow way. But he was a very good champion. The only two-time champion actually is Sheamus.
Yeah.
And you're the longest champion, the longest reigning champion.
That's great. Yeah, Sheamus was definitely like, I always thought of Sheamus as kind of like, he was like the Irish Hulk Hogan, if that makes sense.
He was the Irish Hulk Hogan without trying to make him the Irish Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. He wasn't like a carbon copy. He just had that size and look and natural charisma, and he had like...
I'm very Irish.
Very Irish, and the red hair and everything. It's like, this is perfect. And you could see why the WWE were like, whoo, come over here, sir.
I would have thought that Drew was more a rounded wrestler, better look, better, you know. But Sheamus, I think he had a better fire. He understood things better.
Yeah. And
he knew how to play a game and get in there. And I think that's why he just shot out of the gates straight away. And I don't know, what's he there? 15 years or something like that?
Yeah, he is like unbelievable. He stayed really relative because he's the ability to reinvent himself a little bit, whether it's just like to come out with a little bit of new gear or a slightly different look or a new move every now and then, and that's amazing. That shows like real intelligence and keeping your character alive and longevity, because a lot of people in wrestling don't have longevity. There's no like, if you're lucky enough to get looked at and signed by the big time, you might even get out of development before you're released. Speaking
of Sheamus and the first ever championships, he was the first ever champion. We had our initial tournament in County Kildare in Ireland, and it was an 8-man tournament. We had wrestlers there from Canada, Ireland, England and America.
Cool.
And Vid Vane was there from Canada. We had Johnny Storm from England, Jody Fleisch from England, and Matt Cross. I was trying to give his name. Matt Cross, M-Dog20 was in the tournament as well. Yeah. So Sheamus won that 8-man tournament, and he was the first initial champion. And what was interesting was he used to have a long run initially as the champion, because I think a good way to put prestige into a belt is to have a champion that holds on to it for a while and takes on all comers and challengers. Hence the International Wrestling Championship. He lost that belt to D'Lo Brown. It was a pure fluke. It was a miscommunication with the referee. Sheamus was to lose the match by disqualification by his opponent at the time, Darren Burridge. So that was to have a feud going between those two. But the ref called it wrong, and he ended up counting a pin that he shouldn't have pinned.
All these years, I only know this now.
A lot of people won't know that.
Wow.
So D'Lo wasn't supposed to be the champion. So that's why Sheamus had such a short run, was the referee made a mistake. And I wasn't going to go out there. And at the time there, you still had to keep some form of kayfabe. So I wasn't going to expose to the audience, hey, we're going to do that again.
Yeah.
So to me, the most well-known champion was probably, from an international point of view, obviously Sheamus. But my favourite champion was you, because hence I left the belt on you for 3 years. And you took on challengers from 10 countries.
Yeah.
4 continents.
Yeah.
all around Ireland, every single county. You defended a belt in England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland and Portugal.
Yeah.
So you really brought the international flavour to the belt. Not only the opponents were international, but you actually brought around a number of different countries. So how did you find travelling with the belt?
Travelling with the belt was initially is a lot of pressure because it's such a prestige belt, and I knew like the people that had come before me, so there's a lot of weight on your shoulders.
And tell me, when you were travelling with at the time of the belts, you were a double champion at one stage. Did you have a fear if you're going to lose the belt, going through an airport or maybe in a dressing room? Or
yes. So sometimes whenever I was travelling, Portugal, I was very lucky to have the opportunity to wrestle in Portugal. Whenever I travel over there, I'd always make sure that I took the belt in my hand luggage rather than the checking it in, simply because I had that fear of like my bag not arriving or anything. But there was times where you were in airport security and they would like scan your bag and they were like, what's that? And then they'd have you take it out and they'd be like, oh, let's take a picture of the belt, the wrestling belt and all that sort of stuff. And they were like, who are you? And then you were like, oh, on you go. So I remember some of the wrestlers that would come over, you have like your kid Kash or Vito, Raven and that. They used to tell stories of how they would influence people in airports. If their bags were overweight, they take up some promo pictures and sign them, and there you go, to get away with being charged, or to get extras like meals or drinks in places by posing for pictures. Did you ever get to do any of that in Portugal or England? No, I didn't. Definitely not. But it's one of those things. Even if I was lucky enough to be in their position, I don't think I'd use my influence to do anything like that. I'm happy enough just to pay my way and be nice to people.
And can we tell me, while we're talking about Portugal, I know you went over there for a lot of shows actually, over I think it was a 2-year period.
Yeah.
It wasn't a circus promoters that actually had the shows there. Yeah. Tell us a little bit how circus promoters ran shows over in Portugal.
It was very, from my perspective, it was very cool. I don't know the ins and outs of how they ran things, but the shows took place in a circus tent on the beach. How amazing is that? So you're in this big circus tent. There's like, the shows were packed out, which was great.
What's packed out? A few 100,000 more?
Yeah, I would say in pushing about 1,000. There was pushing about 1,000 people there. So it was a really good atmosphere. Kind of weird as well, because you're like, there's sand here and there's the rings over here. And it was like, the tent was huge, absolutely huge. It fit that many people in. It was unbelievably big. And it was like, the ring's really far away. So they're like, oh, cool. No, don't worry. You're in the back of this. Like, it was like a mini monster truck. So I had to go out to the back of a mini monster truck and
to drive to the ring.
To drive the ring, and they were like, here's an Ireland flag and here's an American flag, because you're the good guy and people like the Irish and the Americans here. So we got to wave both flags for some strange reason. I was like, this is strange. But that was an unbelievable experience, being over there and being a part of that, and it's so different wrestling in the circus.
You travelled, Irish Whip Wrestling has done shows all over Ireland, Northern Ireland. We've done shows in every county, all the major towns, villages.
Yeah.
Did you have any particular area that you'd like going in Ireland? Would you like the bigger towns, the smaller towns, the villages, or did you just, it was a show?
We're talking about Irish Whip and travelling. There's so much you could talk about here. I literally feel like there's nowhere in Northern Ireland or Ireland in general that Irish Whip didn't take me to either wrestle or drive through. I feel like I've seen everywhere, which is like, I feel very lucky for that. That's a pretty cool thing. This is gonna be the most boring answer ever, but obviously my favourite place to wrestle was in my own hometown. I felt like that was one of the most proud moments I had in all of wrestling, was the City Hall. We did the show and we had Kid Kash and we had Doug Basham, Tracy Smothers.
And that particular show where you started to come up, your first show in Newry, it was Tracy Smothers and Kid Kash. You had wrestled in Newry. It was a tag match. I think you were Kash against Tracy and Ballymun Bruiser.
Yeah.
But on that tour, which I'll get into now, is where you started to wrestle in international guys. And it wasn't the first or last time you international guys on your hometown. But so it was pretty impressive in your hometown. And
it was unbelievable because I think the City Hall was close to being sold out, if not sold out.
Yeah, our first couple of times, It was
and all my family were there. So my mum and my brother and aunts and uncles and my granddad, and that was just such a really proud moment. And like there was lots of other little towns and places that there was all little magic moments in them. I really wish I had kept a diary to remember where these specific places are. But sometimes, like, you know, if Ash and I were going somewhere, traveling through Ireland, it would be like, I've been here. And it's like, oh, I've wrestled here, you know, and I feel like that's a cool thing. Irish Whip give me all that time on the road to travel and see stuff and have all these little magical moments in all these different little places. But my favourite place is obviously, it was my hometown in Newry. I got to wrestle here a few times, and each time was very cool for me because I'd have friends or family there, and you know, it was nice to see them proud of what I'd accomplished.
And for you, starting out, you used to drive down in your little car from Northern Ireland down to Dublin, all around the country, picking lads up.
Yeah, picking all these big giant guys up.
By the end of it, it was like, let's organise transport for Mandrake.
yeah.
Complete 360 for you.
It was, and I think like genuinely that was probably also partly down to the fact I hated travelling, I hated driving. As in, I love travelling, I love being a passenger and looking out the window, but I get very stressed driving. See, even to this day, even, you know, driving to work and stuff like that, I'm not the best driver. So when it was like, where are we wrestling? Oh my word, where's that? Because it wasn't like you could just take your phone out and have your sat nav on that. If you had a sat nav, it was one of these clunky things that you had to update every now and then, and was generally always wrong, you know. So
I always remember we had one show particularly down in Waterford. We ran Waterford 2-3 times a year.
Oh, I know.
And you're always trying to get like lads together, certain cars. Drivers are always very important in wrestling for anyone starting out. And there was one guy called Mick from Kilkenny, and as a nixer, a side job, he used to drive big coaches, and he would drive sports teams to various parts of Ireland. But we didn't know that at the time. So we come out after one of the shows. Mick had been around for a while, and I look across the road and Mick's going, oh, I'm going over, I'm heading home, thinking he's joking. And there's a big 55C coach across the road, and he gets into it and drives home. We're there struggling trying to get drivers because it was a TV taping.
Wow.
And he had an empty 55C bus. Oh, sorry about that. If you ever need it again, let me know. But I just thought that was funny. He gets into the thing, and there's 5 lads watching into one of their cars trying to go to Bleeding, wherever part of Ireland it was to go home.
I remember one time my little car, it was a Peugeot 106, and we had like all these giant guys in this little car, and we were driving for hours. I think it was Waterford. What was the place in Waterford? It was a really cool little place.
The Forum.
Yeah, unbelievable little venue. It was so cool. But I remember we finished the show and we were driving off to somewhere else, and the suspension in my little car just went, and it just all like dropped down.
If I asked you, are you sure you can't keep driving it?
It's like, no, it's dead.
Get to the show.
It's gone.
Again, there was one time, Ballymun Bruiser. It was myself. I was driving a Ford Mondeo at the time. This is flash forward years later, and we had a guy called Drew Onyx over from French Canada, Quebec, and he had a couple of his trainees with him. So we're squashed into the car. But I always remember going over speed bumps, lots of speed bumps in Ireland, and we had to travel whole way across the country to Galway. And I just remember going through some of these little small towns, and just his pure wake going over the bumps. And I was like, oh, my suspension, my oil tank. And I was like, this must be how the lads with the little cars used to felt all the wrestlers. Yeah. So then it took me years to realise that, this is what I'm enduring on other lads unintentionally.
But you know, that was all part of the journey, and the one thing we talk about, packing cars full of guys and international guys and stuff, it was a great place to learn.
Yeah. Just
talking to people and picking their brains and stuff. And sometimes you would have like an imported guy, like an American or a Japanese guy or something, and that was even better because you could just pick and pick and pick and pick. And generally, most people were really responsive, and they just sit and want to talk to you. Sometimes they'd just be like, "Can you please be quiet and let me go to sleep?" That was always a bummer.
And again, I used to pick and choose who to put into the car with the Americans or the Mexicans, the Japanese, was to learn about the business.
Yes.
Pick up, not so much your match, what do I need to do to get here, who's the contact person there. But not everybody got that. You get into a... if you're ever in a car travelling with international guys, ex-WWE I should say, don't ask them what's John Cena like, or how many eggs is the Rocky? Ask them questions that could potentially help you to be a better performer and get a job.
Side,
yeah,
the business
exactly,
side.
the business side of it.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but not everybody understands that or grasps what it is like, you know?
I think it's experience as well. I think like young Mandrake and old Mandrake are two different heads. So like if I had my head now back then, it would have been light years different. But back then, like whenever you're young and you start out, you're just like, how can I get my moves in? Which is not the way to do it. It's absolutely not. But like when you're young and you start, you don't know these things. You have to learn, and sometimes you learn the hard way.
Irish whip wrestling wasn't going anywhere, and I wanted to put a build into you. So just to go back in the story, so we had Whiplash TV 2 seasons. Season 2, Drew McIntryre, as he's known now, beat Sheamus for the belt.
Yeah.
My plan was he keeps that belt until season 3. Sheamus chases him for the belt, gets the belt back, and then we'd look at it from there because Sheamus was going to have a long run again. Now, things didn't work out that way. There was some animosity built up, which is a show in itself I'll go on about some other time. Mm-hmm. But Drew had the belt, and I'm glad I put the belt on Drew. He had the belt, defended in England, he was defended in Britain, let's say, up in Scotland and places like that. But there was a fallout with Sheamus. He didn't want to come back to Ireland and drop the belt, which I thought was a bit unprofessional for somebody who had a lot of respect for, and somebody who went on to have a great career. Yeah. So, how do I get the belt back? And another piece of trivia, there's a guy called Paul Robinson. He wrestled for Progress. Drew had offered to drop the belt to him on a show in London, which I had said no to because none of our fan base knew who Paul Robinson was. So he just handed the belt back. He won the belt in August and he handed the belt back in late December to Madman Manson on a show in London. So we had to have a very quick match to put a new champion in place because the Irish Whip champion was the focal point of the shows. That was the story. It was all built around the belt. You have a promo in the first half, building up the match, and that was what sent people home happy, wanting to come back to see the next show. So, the only option I had, I needed to put it on somebody and somebody quick. So we had a 4-way match: Ballymun Bruiser, Madman Manson, Vic Viper, and Kid Kash. Now, I never like putting her on the international guys because you never know whether they're going to come back with the belt or not. Not to put any international guys down, but then you're kind of stuck to them as well, having to pay them certain guarantees that you're coming back and you might change your mind with money. So Manson was a gimmick. He didn't need a belt, and he'd be forced to tell you that himself. So Ballymun Bruiser like yourself needed a lot of ring time. They needed more work.
Yep.
Vic did as well, but Vic had more matches under his belt and he had more of a grasp on his character. So we brought on the Vic Viper thinking, I'm only going to leave it on him till March. And then I was thinking, I might put it on one of the international guys that I know I'm going to be bringing back. Yeah. But then I was like, no. I need to have somebody on the shows going around the country. I brought in Vic. Vic, short-term champion, but when I saw you and what I liked about you, I decided I'm going to leave it on Vic and build you up. And I had a year-long build of building you up from a trainee up to wrestling Irish guys. You even had some intergender tag matches, if you remember.
Yeah.
What was the lady's name from Canada? Portia Perez. Yes. She would come in for some tours, and you know you had all sorts of matches, battle royales. a lot of people don't like battle royales. I like them because you could have 10 guys in the ring and the winner has beat all those other guys in a fan's mind. So you beat 9 other guys and you're the winner. So that's why I like battle royales, for guys coming up.
Yeah, they're a big deal.
So you had done a lot of that, and I knew that I'm going to put the belt on you in March of the next year, because we had our 2 big 2-week tours.
That's right.
Every March and every October. Everything else was like 3 to 5 shows as a tour. In that time, you went around and you wrestled a lot of international guys. Now, I'm going to go on about your first big marquee match now before we go on to when you got the belt. And that was, tell me about the experience, because it was a DVD taping. And we used to sell a lot of DVDs, so this was down in Waterford. And it was you in a 3-way match versus Takeshi Rikio, who had just lost the Pro Wrestling Noah GHC Heavyweight Championship. Yep. And you had Kid Kash, who wasn't long off TV with the WWE. So how was that experience for you, being your first big marquee match, and it's a DVD taping, and we're in one of our A-level venues that we ran several times a year?
Yeah, that was a really cool, unbelievable time. I felt under a lot of pressure, but it was one of those situations where I took every minute of time and was like, right, just breathe. It's okay. You can do this. You can do this. So I met Takeshi Rikio, and he kind of put me at ease a little bit, and he was a really cool guy.
Very humble guy.
Oh my word, like so nice, and like he didn't speak very good English, definitely not, but he could communicate fine, and he just seemed like such a pleasant guy. And I remember there was an issue, I believe, with Kid Kash and the airport, like getting to the venue, so he got there very late. So Rikio, he planned a lot of the match and kind of left some spots in there for Kid Kash, and Kid Kash came in and we spoke, and he was, for a guy who was under a lot of pressure, who was, obviously late through no fault of his own, he was under a lot of pressure, but he came in, he was very professional. He's like, okay, we'll do this, who's going over, and the rest of the framework that Rikio had there, we went into the ring and had the match, and it was really cool. Rikio's obviously a big giant guy. He was like cool to work with though, and unbelievably agile, and everything was really nice to work with. And Kash, really physical guy. Like, he's obviously a legit tough guy. He does a lot of MMA, and when you're working with him, you feel a little bit like you're fighting for your life, but in a cool way. Like, he's a cool guy. Yeah. So, but I remember that match taking a move and getting boom right on top of my head, and I remember everything going like blue. Like, I think I was definitely unconscious for a split second, and then when it came around, I was like, can I feel my legs, can I feel my hands, and I wasn't sure, so I just powdered. So
what were you spiked, or was that just what the intention of the move was, and was that Kash or was that Rikio?
I was taking like I describe it like it was like almost like a brain buster, like a compacted brain buster from Kid Kash, and like just whatever way it landed, it was like I was just right bang on the top of my head. You can watch the match back, I think. Is it up online? I think it's online.
I will show some clips of the match during this.
It's a really insane bump. So like how it is not on Botchamania, I do not know. It's like it looked like I died. I think because of my martial arts training, I'm really flexible, like really, really bendy, and I think that's kind of what saved me, was my flexibility. Because if you watch it, it's literally like I get spiked on the top of my head, and straight away I go whoop, out of the ring. And at least I had the whereabouts to know, like, I need to get out of here. But I was lucky enough, it was okay. Got back in the ring, and we finished everything as planned. But I had to be like, what are we doing? And I remember just like, I remember specifically being outside the ring and coming through and going like, feet. There's lots of feet around me. Feet, lights, wrestling. And then it all came back.
But in that particular match, you took a serious beating in that match. And some guys will complain of, oh, this or that, like, But Kash, I think Kid Kash was trying to impress the Japanese import. And I think he thought by going harder on the Japanese import. Now, he has a really tough physical style.
Yeah, he
which
does.
is believable. Which
and
is
it's
great.
cool. I like it.
But I found looking at it, he went that bit harder on you, and he went that bit harder on you. But I can remember seeing Rikio sometimes in the match kind of like looking back at Kash, giving you a beating, and thinking like, is he going to do that to me? Well, I assume that's what he's thinking, going to do that to me. But it was a very enjoyable, very tough match actually. And I just remember, even though you took the pin in the match, you were the one who ultimately lost the match.
I took the another head spike at the end, yeah.
But the fans' reaction to you before the match and after the match, and that's exactly what I was looking for. And they gave you these good matches in all the key venues that we returned to a lot that had the big house. Now, when I say big house, we're not talking thousands of people. Like Waterford, when it was sold out, which was most times, it was roughly 310 people. But it's the same loyal fan base that you have. And the people who couldn't come in, you'd sell them a programme, people would talk about you, and that's how you got to see it. This before your digital age, which it is now. And from there, that's where I felt comfortable. On that tour, Kash came in for a few tours, Tracy Smothers, I felt comfortable putting you in the ring with all these guys.
Yeah.
Your Kid Kash, your Tracy Smothers, and just before you won the belt.
One of the things that I think about that match, and that was like my first, I remember sitting at a table one day and I got a message through saying, you're working Kid Kash and Takeshi Rikio at this plan. And I was like, I started sweating straight away. It's like, oh my word, the pressure. But I think it was a great opportunity. And like you said, I think the fans did buy into me being in there with these two guys who they recognised and knew. But I think that was because of the way I looked, and it showed you how important a look is and a character is, that I didn't seem out of place. And I was lucky I was in there with two really seasoned veterans that were able to carry me through like a half decent match, because I was very green at the time.
Hence, that's why you put it into the three-way, so...
Yeah, it wasn't as obvious. With those two guys in there, they could carry me through it. But the fans were fine with it. They were fine with everything because, you know, there's Kid Kash, who's this like legit super tough guy, super shredded, and then there's Takeshi, who's like this big giant sumo wrestler guy, and I didn't look out of place like physically with them. So it shows you how important having a look is and a character and being able to carry yourself with confidence is.
100%. And even going on from that, like, so you used to use guys at the time they would come through tours of England and Europe, and I would get them while they're on their tours of Europe. I'd use guys from Pro Wrestling Noah and Dragon Gate. So you worked a fair few Dragon Gate guys as well. This is all before you won the belt, to build you up and prepare you and to put you with the fans around the country. Then you had, I don't know if you remember, it wasn't an opponent, but you worked some tags with him, El Generico, who went on to be Sami Zayn.
Yeah.
But you do learn, even watching how they work, little things that they would do that the crowd reacts to, like, you know?
Absolutely. It like, all those guys, again, I was very lucky that I was put into the ring with a lot of these really seasoned guys, and sometimes it's the small little nuances that they do, and sometimes you don't even realize you're learning. You just subconsciously pick it up and you do it yourself, and then someone asks you like, oh, where'd you learn that from? You're like, I'm not exactly sure. But like when you wrestle like I don't know, 10 matches with someone like Doug Basham, you can't, you know, you will get better, you know, or the likes of a Kid Kash or someone like that. And that was one of the things I feel very lucky for, is being in the ring with all those type of guys.
And tell me, do you feel you came across some jealousy in the dressing room from the Irish talent? Because it was quite obvious you were being pushed, and I let people who needed to know you were going to be the champion come March. Like,
I'm sure there was, but I did not see it. No one was off with me or anything like that. Like, I feel like maybe they didn't resent me, but they were kind of like, but why is he?
To tell you the truth, to me there was only ever two tough guys. You have the Ballymun Bruiser, who's more of a street fighter. He can handle himself. And you were a trained, professional, legit martial artist. So a lot of them probably wouldn't say anything to you in case, but you wouldn't have acted. I've seen you up and down the road where people have antagonised you in bars and nightclubs, and you haven't reacted. You know?
No, it's not in my nature to be aggressive, and I do everything in my power not to be aggressive. Like if a situation, I like to think martial arts, Taekwondo in particular, teaches you a great deal of self-control. You think what you're learning could potentially be lethal. You know, you never want to pull that trigger, you know, because you know the consequences could be. So like getting into scraps, especially over ego. Most fights are always ego, and again, going back to wrestling, the wrestling business, and again, anyone who is a performer in the wrestling business, including myself, when you're involved in it, sometimes the ego takes over. It's a very selfish business, you know, it's all about yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree completely what you're saying. To talk about Kid Kash, not ragging on Kid Kash, he was great when he was here, he sold tickets. Cool. But he could go tough, and if someone annoyed him or pissed him off in the ring, he'd lay it in. But I remember one night, there was one of the guys in the ring, and I can see where they came from. I was going to put this belt here, the Zero Gravity, on Kid Kash at the start of the tour and take it off the end of the tour, 2 separate DVD tapings. But he didn't want to lose the belt back to a particular guy. Fair enough, I could see his point why he didn't, so I didn't do the title change. So the champion at the time, Bingo Balance, he went in there and he roughed up Bingo pretty bad, black eyes, and he took it out, and I'm like, you know, and Bingo wasn't going to do anything. Nice guy, pretty soft, well, soft from the point of view he's not tough, as in he can fight. And I always remember pulling Kid Kash into a room and saying, that was disgraceful, you shouldn't be doing that, bad carry on. But I was prepared, I can't fight now, but I was prepared to take a beating from Kid Kash, and I was fully prepared. I thought he was going to give me a punch, but he held himself, told his part. I knew about him, if he wanted he could have just knocked me out, but I think he was smart enough to know he still had a whole week of paydays to come. But I always remember how he held himself very well, and so said yeah, and he took me giving out to him, and he went on with the rest of his day. Like, and there is a mental strength carrying himself like that. Fair play to him.
You know, it's
not fair play to him. You beat up Bingo. You shouldn't have done that. Like,
there's a certain professionalism there. But you like the promoter is kind of at the end of the day is the boss. You know, and if your boss says something, sometimes even if you don't agree with it, you just have to be, yes sir, I'll get on and do my job. That's the way it works. And
like I'm with Kid Kash, he did put anyone that asked him to put over, he put them over. He just didn't want to drop that particular belt back to this guy. Now I don't know if it was a case of he didn't want to lose the belt, or I know the guy who he was going to drop the belt to was much smaller than him. I wasn't his mind is talented, so I can understand where he was coming from. But he was fine. He still went out and put your guy over, and everybody else on the tour, yourself included, that you had to, which is what you want in an international guy. Moving on, you had all these international guys you wrestled. We used to bring in a lot of guys like Joe Redmond and T-Bone, and you know, obviously they went on to sign contracts with Next. So you would have wrestled a lot of these guys prior to winning the belt and winning the belt. So how did that feel to see guys who you were as good as actually go on to get contracts before you did? Or
well, I was happy for them. Of course, you can't. You know, you should be happy for them, but you can't help but feel a little bit left behind. Yeah, well, that's the way it did. I genuinely. Like we said, we have spoken before at this, like I'm, you know, no matter, I'm happier now in the place I am in my life and what I'm doing, I think, than I would be if I had a big contract like that.
Brand, and again, we could touch on that later, but for me, I mean, coming up, like your promo set, how you interacted with an audience was just night and day to those guys, and they were there to learn. I'm not knocking them. Those lads deserve, and I actually think Joel Redmond should actually still have a contract with Next UK. To be fair,
he's very dedicated and very into it.
But you're putting so much work in, and there's guys that are coming up, and I know here in Ireland, we didn't get preoccupied with what was going on in England and anywhere else, because
No.
there's so much shows and so much
Yeah.
work going on. And you'd wrestle all these international guys. And what I used to like to do was we'd bring in guys from, say, Wales. And I know could be Cayman, Carol Griffiths, he wrestled quite a few tours here. So he would be, say, the Welsh champion. And he'd come out and he'd be Welsh champion with the belt. You'd create it in some way that it's an untitled match. But you would be the Welsh champion. Or you'd be the North Western England champion. Or you'd beat the English British heavyweight champion. And because it was an untitled match, you'd get the belt. But in the fans' mind, it just made you stronger and stronger and stronger.
It just puts a little bit more shine on the champ, doesn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
And then I remember the few months leading up to you winning the belt, I was putting you with the champion at the time, and I was putting you as the winner by count out, by disqualification, because I knew once you got that belt, there wasn't going to be any rematches with that current champion. He'd had his run, that was the end of it, and then it was moving on from him. So even for the fans, in their minds, they thought, he can beat the current champion. So when you came back as the champ, in their minds, we're having the rematches.
That's very clever.
Yeah.
Like when you look at it now, it's like, wow, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. Like the whole build up for the Mandrake character was amazing. We had the King of the Gym right at the start. So within the school, the gym matches was a great experience.
So obviously in the gym, we'd have gym shows.
Yeah.
Which are like, you had the ABC shows. A shows are your TV tapings, your DVD tapings, your, say, 500-seat venues. But with the gym shows, it was only really aimed at 20, 30 people. That's all you could really fit into the place.
Yeah.
And it was experience for guys coming up.
Yeah,
but purposely, you were the better of the two guys. There's a chap called Wayne Daly, nice guy.
Super cool.
Obviously, he hadn't got the physique. He hadn't got the background you had, obviously, coming into it. Really good guy, and it's a shame he didn't stick with wrestling. But I purposely put him over to see how you would handle not winning that.
Yeah.
And you did care.
To me, like wins and losses in wrestling is, I don't know why, I think I just understood at the start, it didn't really matter that much. Like I said, like earlier, like most of the guys I used to like watching on TV were the bad guys who end up losing anyway, but you still thought they were the man. Yeah. Do you know that sort of way?
Every time
yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable bad guy.
when you go to the toy shop and you're going to buy an action figure, do you buy He-Man or do you buy Skeletor? You buy Skeletor because he's cool, you know. So I kind of looked at it that way. I was like, when I went to do my match, it was like I didn't really mind winning or losing. It was just more go out and do your best. And kind of the longer I wrestled for, kind of the more I realized things. Like at the start, like I said, you're very green and you're trying to remember spots. Then it was to go out and go like, this crowd, okay. Over there, this good part of the crowd there, and you start to learn to work the crowd and read the crowd. But that was just all experience, and like, you know, I got plenty of experience with Irish Whip. It seemed like every weekend at least you were driving somewhere, and the tours, the 2 weeks tours, was there more than 2 weeks? I think I remember a 10-day tour.
Yeah, so
there was 2 weeks. Yeah.
It would be a 10-day tour with 14 shows.
Yeah.
So we would call it the 2 week tour because it was 14 shows. Yeah. So it would be a show on a Friday, 2 on a Saturday, 2 on a Sunday, and then we repeat the process until the following Sunday. Then there was a Friday to a Saturday. Most times it was just a Saturday and a Sunday show, and then you'd have your spot shows, and then you'd have your gym shows, but it was all over the country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at the time, it was tough because you had so many people. You have responsibility to people who are paying their dues and learning how to train. You don't have to give them matches. They're only there to learn the skill set, which I'm sure you know, owning a Taekwondo training school and gym. You're not obliged to give them these matches, you know. But people in wrestling think they're entitled to matches, which you're not. But I used to try my best to put people in. But single matches or tag matches to a degree, depending on what the story is and who you're working with, single matches are always best. And I'm going off topic here. We're getting but yeah, it comes down to learning. So I would try to use as many people from the gym as I could. But with you, I just knew I had something there. Now, prior to you, I had Bruiser. Bruiser had come up the same way. He's a different topic in himself. Refereed a whole lot. But with you, I knew there was something special there, long term, that I could build around for years. And it worked out perfect. So everything we've talked about so far, what you learned, Irish guys, the various tag matches, battle royales. Then when it came to winning this belt, people already knew who you were. So we'd come back to the Donny Carney Sports Centre in Dublin. And it was such great shows. We used to do 2 shows a day when we would do there. And you had, your first show there was against Wayne Daly.
Wayne, yeah.
You went there. You look back some of the pictures, which I'll put up here. If you're watching the vodcast, and you didn't look at the shape you later became.
No.
So you had come such a long way in that year of getting slowly pushed and slowly fed to people around the venues.
Yeah.
And then you had your 3-way match, which was for the heavyweight championship against Eugene. Nick Dinsmore. He wasn't long off TV, and again he drew tremendous crowds, I have to say, going around on that tour. And the champion Vic Viper. Now you'd already beaten Vic around the belt, or around the circuit, I should say, in the important towns. But I wasn't going to be putting you in with Eugene. 2 good guys, you know. Yeah. So by you winning that belt and pinning Vic, you also, in the fans' eyes, beat Eugene. So you beat a WWE guy and you beat the champion to win that belt. So hence that's why I had a 3-way that night, because you weren't going to wrestle Eugene again as a singles opponent. And it worked well. Yeah. It really worked well, I thought, and fan spotting. How did it finally feel for you winning the championship?
Kind of surreal, because being entrusted with that title again, like I said before, knowing the people that had come previous to me, it's kind of like saying okay, now you're kind of not necessarily they'd gone and they're doing other things, but you're in that same sort of position and you're the champion, and people are going to come to watch you wrestle, and that was surreal. A lot of pressure. I was very happy. Some of my favorite times in wrestling, for example, at that time, I remember going home, and when you're away from wrestling and the people
in your comfort zone, and back home in your comfort zone,
quiet contemplation about what I'd accomplished, and again just showing my mum and my brother, and just taking this is the hard work and the sacrifice, and quiet contemplation, thinking I've accomplished something very cool here, but also feeling still a lot of pressure, because I knew I had to be a lot better. I wanted to be better, if that makes sense.
I did, and to me you improved as the whole way along each year. Now, when you won this belt 2008, we had stopped doing the Whiplash TV show. Mm-hmm. So the previous champs had it, Sheamus and Drew McIntryre. They would have been exposed a lot through the TV show. Yeah. And that TV show went all over Ireland, all over Britain. Its biggest viewers were actually in Britain, and it went to Spain and France as well, actually. Of course, people would not download it. You didn't do that back then. You recorded it off Sky Digital, off your box. Yeah. So, the tape traders were doing it as well. So the lads got good exposure through that. And then obviously you went on elsewhere, but you hadn't got that luxury of the TV show then. No. But what we did do, we moved more into making DVDs. Yeah. So you had more of a hands-on job of going around the and at that stage we were running a lot more shows than we did. Yeah. In 2005, 2006. So 2007 started to take off. 2008 is when the numbers of shows increased, and we're doing roughly around 60 shows a year, which is huge for Ireland. I mean, Ireland's such a small country, and they're doing it everywhere all over the country. So you had that responsibility of trying to, as the poster boy, the shop boy, make people happy, send them home happy, and work with whatever opponent you had. Yeah. Must have been a lot of pressure.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, that's where it's I felt like I was under a lot of pressure, and also because I wanted to improve and make sure that I was that guy that could deliver on those things, that I wasn't going to falter, that like not to be stagnant, to go away and look at what I'm doing and go, how can I improve this? And when we were speaking there earlier, we were talking about when I first won the belt and the way I looked and stuff like that. I was always under the idea of like, you know, a wrestler has to be as big as they can be. Now, I'm not very big. I'm like 5'9" at a stretch, 5'10" on a tall day. But I was still under that mentality, as big as I can. And I don't think that look of all that mass on my frame really worked. It wasn't until I worked with Doug Bashan, and he was like, he said to you, tell him to get leaner. And I was like, what? But I'm trying to be a wrestler. But after I was like, went away and thought about it, again, trying to improve, I changed my whole training routine and the way I ate, and I became a lot smaller but leaner, but it had a superstar look to it. Whereas when I was bigger, I just looked big and chunky. But when I was smaller and leaner, I looked like a star. And it was about those things just to improve all the time. So I improved my look. And then I was trying to figure out about things like move sets, and like, because I wasn't a big giant guy, but I wasn't like a 450 land on your head guy either. So then I started incorporating a little bit of my taekwondo kicks and stuff into my offense, because I could do that really well.
But that really solidified the character, I think, with those splits.
Yeah.
That you used to do, and you know, certain somebody become at you with a clothesline, you just go down with the splits to avoid it and back up, and
that was I kind of stole that from old Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. It's like I grew up watching him, and it was like, dropping down in the splits. So anytime it was like had to duck something, or like I was going into the splits.
But you were doing, to me, and I could see how kids would react, fans on the show. You're doing something that they couldn't do.
Yeah.
Which I think is impressive in any form of creativity or entertainment. When someone can do something you can't do,
yeah,
it's all that more impressive.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think the cool thing about wrestling is, like, everyone knows it's entertainment and stuff, but there still has to be a suspension of disbelief. Yeah. Is that how you said it? And when you come out in front of an audience and you get in a ring and you perform, the people in the crowd, not just the kids, but even the dads that are there, should be like, that person's pretty handy. Do you know what I mean? They shouldn't be like, here, I could get up and whip that guy with a wet paper towel.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So that was a part of it. But it was in that period of time getting the belt, it was all about learning how to improve, and that a lot of it was the international talent. Working with the international talent really brought my game up a lot. But it was also not just working with people, but listening to people. Like I said, I think listening is an amazing skill. So like, you're using less of this and more of this, listening to like
more your ears,
and listen to people who are wiser than you, and even if they say, so I remember hearing you said Doug says to get leaner, and I was like, but why? Like, I want to be big and strong. And if you think about it, if you're on a beach and you see a big guy who looks like he lifts some weights and eats a lot of food, you're like, oh yeah, he lifts weights. But if you see a shredded guy, you're like, holy.
But even your beard, in the early days you didn't have a beard.
Yeah,
and then you had the beard, and it made a huge difference.
Yeah, it was always like, I always tried to change wee things in my look, and then when I became a heel, I put the stripe through my hair. I dyed a big stripe, and I would change it different colours and stuff like that. And I really loved that creative side as well of the character, and developing the character, the wee changes.
What I loved about that character, obviously the Black Heart Warrior was when you were a good guy. Mm-hmm. The warrior, the Black Heart, and you know, bad guy, you were the Irish Devil, which was at a later stage. We'll get into that. Yeah. But when you had that look, and the fans were into you, the kids loved you, the moms, there used to be a lot of moms that were like, they were kind of encouraging the kids to come over. Yeah. I could get people to then buy Polaroids in the ring. Yeah, yeah. Programs, you're on the cover. Yeah. Go over to the kids, the mom. Well, I'd have someone going over, and they would be signing them at half time. You can meet them at the table, and you see a lot of the mothers and the kids be mad to buy. So they wanted to buy anything it was to get that bit closer to you. Pictures in the ring, buying the program, something you're going to sign, and that created more money for the promotion. You know.
We did a lot of those photos in the ring, didn't we? Did a lot of them. But they were great fun as well. One of the cool things was if you had the little kid come in, and the little kid, it was just cool to see like their face light up. And if you said something like, "I like your Spider-Man t-shirt," they're like, "Oh," you know, that was really cool.
And at a later stage, what we did years later was when we did a lot of the soul shows, it was more of a traditional kind of good guy, bad guy. So we didn't rely on having to sell tickets. We just put on the best show we could for soul shows. So I'd always try to finish. You couldn't do it numerous times in the same town, but where the bad guy would do an awful lot of cheating or somebody would interfere where they'd have to get in, and I'd always have the ref take the picture then, so they're dying to tell the ref, you know. So
Amazing.
He cheated, yeah, tell the ref. And they couldn't tell the ref, and then who's ever thinking, "Oh, no, I had to go into the rings, €5." Mammy, give me €5. And then you get in and get the picture, and then, "Oh, he cheated, what?" And then you tell the ref, "Oh, you need to tell me the next match. If you see him, you blah, blah, blah," you shout out, like, you know.
Hope all the wrestling promoters out there taking note of this. This is gold dust.
Great ways to make extra money, and that's what it was, ticket sales and merchandise sales to make money. But again, that's from a promoter's point of view. So the Black Heart Warrior Mandrake, up and down the country, everywhere, with the belt. In between shows, then you would go to England, and Wales as well, and Portugal. How was it to balance? Because obviously it wasn't a full-time living as a wrestler. It was a full-time, part-time, if that makes sense.
It was a
full-time, part-time job.
Full-time, like, career. It's a career, but it's not a job. Job pays your bills. Career is what eventually you want. That's the way I kind of looked at it. So, and I still kind of look at it like, I still kind of approach things like people that are doing things like in the entertainment industry, like they want to be an actor or this or that. You have to, realistically, you have to have your job that pays your bills and keeps the roof over your head, but that's your career. And you can tell the people who make it and the people who won't make it, because the people that do their job and go home and go, "Oh, I'm really tired." And then the people that really have the drive go, "Oh, go home and now I'm going to work on my career." Those are the people, I think, that make it. And with wrestling, I worked a security job when I was wrestling. I was doing like these long 12-hour shifts in shopping centres, either like standing around the shopping centre or sitting in a little control room. But I was always like running through matches in my head or thinking of different words for promos, because I like words in my promos. I was always working on it, but like that was my job. I had to, pay for my little tiny car that was going to break down every second tour.
I always remember I'd be ringing guys who would have their jobs in could be IT companies, someone could be working for security in an offices, and I'd be emailing them or ringing them, but I'd be so ignorant to the fact that I would be taking up their employer's time by having them focus on wrestling, or me, I want this, and this is what you need to do. So when you were telling your story there, your job and you're thinking of wrestling. Yeah. So realistically, I mean, I'm not sure if people lost jobs, and I'm sure a lot of lads got into trouble with their employers.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I probably shouldn't say this on old internet land, but like I remember like tours and stuff coming up or whatever, or shows, and you'd ring in sick to go and do them, like, because like I said, this was just the job to get a little money, but like my passion, my soul, what I wanted to achieve was my career, which was wrestling. And it's like, I would take the chance to get out and do the shows.
Thanks for that. And look, with hindsight,
I never got far, so it was good.
I'm sure anybody would say, wherever in their career, in their life, or wherever business they had, maturity comes with age and experience, and people make mistakes. You don't learn from your mistakes. An old cliche, you'll never learn, but it's very true. And you don't know those things at the time, but I always had a goal for Irish Whipping Work. It wasn't just one show in one regional venue, or just to say I'm a promoter or be around wrestlers. It was to build something, which is what I did along the way, and a national touring company. But it was very important to have people in place that could do that. good hands.
Yeah.
Good, where somebody was a good street team, someone to do marketing. It was like a Ray Rooney, Captain Rooney was vital in Paris, and there was a Mick Wall, but you were that shop guy for 3 years. 3 years and 1 month I had you as that champion.
Yeah.
And the only reason I took the belt off you is because you went around the same town. The same town
for a change.
Because when we had Sheamus and Drew, it was national still, but there wasn't as many. We would do it the counties, but we wouldn't do so many different areas in the one county. It just really exploded. So we'd have towns come 2008 and 9 and 10 that we do once every 2 years because we had so many places we were doing and limited amount of time. So Sheamus and Drew, to me that was the first real feud in Irish Whip. Singles matches, lumberjacks, best of 3 falls, last man standing, submission rule, because they're going around the loop wrestling each other so many times. And then when you were the champion, your main first opponent was Doug Basham, and then it was the supermodel. And because we're coming back to the same towns with the same matches, we had to change
the wheel and get something different going.
So many different matches you had to do, wasn't there, to keep it fresh?
Oh, absolutely. Different types of matches, like what's it going to be this week? So it was like go and look at the cards, last man standing match. Like, I've never done one of them. Let's go figure that one out.
But it wasn't just
2 out of 3 falls.
First time in a town, last man standing match. It was changing the match to keep them interested.
Absolutely, yeah. It was those stipulations, so it kept everything fresh and whatnot, and it was challenging for me as well. Like I remember an Ironman match, so it was like 60 minutes. But then
30 minutes we did.
Was it 30 minutes?
30 minutes.
Yeah, it felt like 60 minutes. But like that was pretty hard going in terms of like not physically. Physically it was fine. I could have definitely worked 30 minutes. It was keeping people involved because it's not about like that's what it's about. Getting people involved in your match, getting eyes and getting people's attention, and especially the young people getting their hearts involved in what's going on, suspending their disbelief for that 30 minutes, or I think it was 60, but was it 30? It's really cool. And one of the things that you said to me there, and I think like how cool is that? Like back in the day, so you had Sheamus and Drew touring around all these towns, which is a legit WrestleMania main event. That could be,
Well, now obviously.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, and it's been all over Ireland already.
I remember I used to. So obviously, you're always so close together. You're going very well. You were best friends, and you got to the stage you only wanted to wrestle each other. But realistically, it was the most believable match. But for me, that was the first real feud, and it's good to have feuds like that. Hence, afterwards was you and Supermodel, and then so it was always nice to have those. And even when they replace lads, I'd always have underneath guys coming up, and I had guys that I knew I wanted to eventually replace Sheamus and Drew. Now, like I said, there was a falling out, so I didn't get to have that space to build up the next guys, which obviously would have been like yourself. So that I learned a valuable lesson from that. Like, so when Drew wasn't coming back to Ireland to defend the belts, I knew I had to do something. And going forward from there, I suppose in a roundabout way, I'm grateful of the experience because I learned to always keep at least 2 guys ready to move up.
Very cool.
And that's where I had gone the whole way along. And lads would get jealous. Why is this guy coming up here? Why is this guy doing that? And eventually it was just to replace these guys. And I'd bring guys down, put another guy on top, replace them again. And it worked out well. But you stayed in that position for those 3 years. And after the 3 years, I brought you down that little bit and started putting the next guys over, and you had no problem whatsoever.
I thought it was totally cool. You know? I really enjoyed it. I know that sounds wrong, so I had that top spot for so long, and I'm very, very grateful for that, and it was very cool, and I had a great run. But I was excited because, like, putting over Supermodel, Ian, so, like, Guy definitely deserved it anyway. Like he
put a lot of work into his look and how
and I was wrestling him lots as well, and he kind of like he started and he was a little greener, and I kind of felt like I had to take him under my wing a little bit, and he absorbed everything and was always full of questions and learned, and he in turn became really, really good.
But he came up the same way, runner.
Oh,
ref,
absolutely.
You know, same
I remember him reffing loads of my matches, but he definitely came into his own, and he deserved that run, the great run that he had at the top. But it gave me the opportunity, like, people would look at, oh, he's moving down in the card, but I got to do other things and learn different things. So sometimes I'd be working with people who I haven't worked before, or I'd be in a 6-man tag, and it's like, this is cool, this is different stuff, you know. And it gave me the opportunity as well, as from, you know, going, I think I went from being the good guy to being the bad guy, so a total reinvention of character, which I loved. So I changed the way I looked, I changed my in-ring style. The only, I like I said, I preferred, it was more fun being a heel. The only thing I didn't like is, like, you didn't have the positive effect on the people that disliked you. You know, you didn't get to, like, high five the kids and, you know, send them home happy. It was someone else's job. But I think a good heel kind of does do that, because they want to see you lose, and, you know, but that's what I loved. It gave me other things to do, and like I said, wins and losses, they didn't really mean much to me as long as I got to go in and perform.
I think if you tell a good story,
story,
and you lose or win a certain way, that's what's important.
Yeah, it keeps you believable. If it's done right, it keeps you believable, you know.
So for me, when you had the belt, your first guy you went on the loop with was Rene Dupree.
Yeah, right.
And Rene Dupree, I don't think he was long off the WWE either, but he just looked the size of him, his carriage, he was massive, like, you know.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty impressive guy physically. And I always remember, I have a picture of it and pop up here as well. When the two of you would face, he's obviously taller and he's looking down at you.
Yeah.
But when you won that match, just the reaction of the kids was,
Yeah, Rene was a super athlete, obviously, and just so naturally gifted, and had that incredible look. And, like, he was a legit giant. He was a big guy, both in terms of his physique and his height as well. And like I said earlier, I'm not a tall guy, so that became very apparent, like, you know, when I was standing in front of him. But I kind of looked at it like, you know, if you look at that right, it's like Ivan Drago and Rocky. You ever look at the standoff between Ivan Drago and Rocky? Ivan Drago's looking down at Rocky, he's the underdog, and I think
that's a good comparison.
That's the way it came across. I
think it's very realistic to compare Rene Dupree to
Ivan Drago.
Yeah.
And like in ring and stuff like that. Yeah, I really enjoyed my matches with Rene. He was really good. You know, he looked, again, I was still green at the time, and he really helped me out and looked after me and tried to make me shine, tried to really, like, make me look good, which I really appreciate.
Rene, I think it's French Canadians. A lot of French Canadians have this very blasé kind of.
He was super chill guy. He was like,
and so I was thinking, he's not taking you serious, me serious, but just his it was his personality. But I remember I put him in a match with Madman Manson on the first show he was in, and he was beating Manson by, was it count out, I think it was, just getting ready for a match with you that he beat one of the other faces and you were going to beat him, and he went like 7 minutes, and I had the match for like 15. I'd like to time them out perfectly, build it up as it went along, and depending on what was in the card, and it went 7 minutes. And I remember having a chat with him backstage and saying, man, you can't be doing that, you know. And I said something along the lines of, what if I only pay you half your money, you know, which wrestlers hate when you mess with their money. And I could tell he was a bit offended, like, and again, a tough guy who could slap me around if he wanted, but obviously he had money to make. And after that match with you, because it was a DVD taping, so we needed a certain length.
Yeah, it was a long.
And as a rib ready to free, I said, I want you to do half an hour matches around the loop that weren't the DVD tapings. Like, he did, in fairness to him.
Wow.
He went out there and
That's
he did
professional.
And very impressed. Very, very impressed with Rene Dupree. So it's mad how, one thought of a person. You know, so don't always read people the wrong way. Like, but for me, he did, as a promoter, what was asked.
Yeah.
Put everybody over. Didn't complain, had his match.
I think he was a cool guy as well, just to be around. He was nice, like you said, he was very chilled, very relaxed. And I think, like, he went on, he reinvented himself quite a lot as well, even in terms of his look. I thought that was really cool.
He ended up in Japan. And his father, actually, I don't know if people know.
He's a legendary wrestler as well.
Promoter, wrestler and a promoter. Speaking of French Canadians, then you would have wrestled around the same tour, and after that, PCO.
Yeah,
who reinvented himself there.
Oh wow!
In the last few years.
What a reinvention!
Again, another professional wrestler to deal with, put everybody over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Perfect.
all I like with him. Like all I can say was exactly what you said. He's just very professional. He was very nice in the locker room.
And another guy that you wanted, I'm sure he could hurt you in the real world, but he chose not to. Like,
yeah, so, absolutely. And
carried himself well.
A big giant.
Yeah.
A big giant as well, like you said. Like but in the ring, great, so good. And again, I was green as grass, and they manoeuvred me around the ring and. Again, taught me a lot as well.
There's a match, I'll put up some clips here, and it's on the YouTube channel, Suicide Fighter YouTube channel, and it's you and Eugene in a tag match against PCO and Rene Dupree in Cork.
Yeah.
It was a great match because they obviously were just, it was a short enough match, it was the second match at the end of the night. You had worked twice on the show, and you could see them just obviously telling you what to do in the match, and you just did this, went along with it. And I actually enjoyed that match for what it was. It's a very basic match.
Yeah.
The fans loved it, sold a lot of merchandise. So it's yeah.
It was a big crowd as well.
There was about 600 in that night in Cork. It was a big arena. We had about 600 people in, and they were eating up that show. And all the lads put in a good job in fairness to them, really did.
Yeah, it was a good show. I remember that. I remember that tag match. Yeah.
So, any promoters out there, any issues with the wrestlers, or you think you might have, just have a chat with them, and you know from there. I mean, the pure respect, both ways works,
Yes, absolutely.
And if somebody's putting your talent over, taking their finisher, fair play to them,
Yeah.
You have to respect that as well. That's a sign of a professional, because there is guys out there who came in who, we'll talk about. Vito, Big Vito was a guy who, I get on with him, same thing, he put lads over, but he could be tough. He could take advantage. He was a guy who was a tough guy, but I know he did take advantage of some guys while he was here. Again, I had no issues with him. I used him on 2 or 3 tours, I think. But you had an experience with him, didn't you? In Wexford, I think it was.
Yeah, I think my match with Vito, it was a difficult one because again, I don't know what it is. It's with guys in airports. He got in late, I think.
That was the first show, first tour he did in Drogheda, yeah. I forgot all about that, yeah.
The first time I'd seen Vito was when his entrance music hit and he was coming down to the ring. And that was, and at that stage I was like, oh my word, what are we going to do? And of course, what do you do in this situation? You listen to the veteran. But we got through the match. There was a couple of little bloopers in it, and obviously, these things happen sometimes. Communication, whenever you're communicating some things to some people, they can pick it up wrong or whatever, and then you get the obligatory fines of Red Bull, which was what happened. But the thing was, I think that came, I think, I don't know, but Vito's a very old school guy, so maybe back in the day when he was being brought up, his more seniors were heavier on him, and
which I would well believe. He came up to likes of Johnny Rods, and he did his tours of Puerto Rico, which
would have been hard.
Yeah, would have been tough.
Yeah.
That match in Drogheda, there was a match in Drogheda, and you're on last with Vito. I think he missed his plane from England coming over, and Doug was on the match before that. He had to go longer, but I was reffing, and then I got word that Vito had changed the finish, that he wasn't losing.
Oh yeah,
to you in the match.
Vaguely remember this.
Yeah, and I was I can't have that. And he got into the ring, and I moved him into the corner to check his boots, and he very politely said to him, shook his hand, and I said, I'm glad you're here. More or less we can make some money together, but I need you basically to do what you want. And he looked at me very serious, and I say he was thinking in his head, will I, won't I? But he did do that, in fairness. And he put over whatever he asked him to put over, And I do think it was him trying to put his experience onto lads.
Yeah.
And lads, there was no need to be that harsh on lads here.
Yeah.
I believe there was no need for that harsh. So,
because guys were just green and they were trying to learn. They're not being disrespectful. They're just trying to learn.
And for Irish whip, wrestling's very toxic, and I always wanted to have that nice positive environment. Which isn't always possible, and you learn that as you go along. But yeah, you don't want someone like that is going to leave after a tour, but you still have that vibe left. Yeah. So it's important that you don't keep that.
And I think whenever you have a crew of people, morale is really important. When you have
especially when you're up and down for hours in the car each way. Yeah. And the same people, international or not, are going to be at the next show. That you really have to keep a tight ship. You have to do that. You really have to keep control of your own ship. Any business, really.
The way I kind of look at it is like, if you're self-employed and someone employs you to do the job, you can't just go in and go, I'm going to paint your walls green because I prefer green rather than red. You paint them what they want.
You've got your own Taekwondo school and business.
Yeah.
You're not going to let somebody dictate to you what they want to do in their days.
Nope.
Because you know it's you paying your own bills, your own family to look after.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it works.
And again, it takes maturity. And unfortunately, wrestling doesn't always attract those people. And sometimes they learn it years later. But it's just a shame. People do grow in age, but people are painted with the same brush for the rest of their life in wrestling. Now, come here. We're talking here a while. I might finish up here, and we'll come back with a part 2. And we'll come back and we're going to talk about Balls Mahoney.
Oh,
Balls is a lot of stories about Balls and about Doug.
I love Balls. Balls was cool. I said I was so good to me, so I have nothing but good stories. Some crazy stories, and like I hope he's watching somewhere up there.
So then we'll talk about Doug, and I think you must have had about 24 matches, if not more, with Doug.
I think I learned more from Doug than like any other wrestler.
And then your tryouts, you had your WWE tryout, you had your TNA tryout. We'll go on about them as well, and we will also talk about what brought you to the end of wrestling and life after wrestling.
Life after wrestling.
Lots more stories.
Yeah, there's.
Thanks for watching so far, and we'll be back with the podcast.